In the 1970s, viewing a movie at midnight was an act of rebellion. Fringe movies that failed at the box office, shunned by traditional moviegoers, found a second cinematic life in the middle of the night. While traditional movie patrons headed home around 11:30 p.m. for bed, counterculture audiences flocked like vampires to cult flicks that only played at midnight. Films too shocking, too disturbing, and too transgressive for mainstream audiences. We'll be taking a deep dive into the heyday of midnight movies. So here's a spoiler alert for El Topo, Pink Flamingos, The Harder They Come, Night of the Living Dead, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Eraserhead, Reefer Madness, Freaks, Donnie Darko, and The Room. Here is the rise and fall of midnight movies. As early as the 1930s, there have been occasional movie screenings at midnight, often road shows, but the phenomenon of the midnight movie really began in the 1970s with El Topo. El Topo, which translates to The Mole, was a Mexican acid western with Judeo-Christian symbolism and Eastern philosophy, filmed in Spanish with English subtitles. It was foreign. It was violent. It was weird. Here's the real rundown. A mysterious gunfighter wanders a mystical western landscape, encountering bizarre characters on his quest for enlightenment. Then Barinholtz, owner of the Elgin Theater in New York, caught a screening of the film at the Museum of Modern Art, fascinated by the film. Barinholtz convinced the producer to have El Topo shown at midnight at the Elgin. It premiered there in December 1970 and ran every midnight or 1 a.m., often to sold-out audiences. 7 days a week until the end of June 1971. El Topo caught the attention of John Lennon, who saw multiple screenings of it at the Elgin. The former Beatle became an enthusiastic champion of the unorthodox film. As a result, Beatles manager Alan Klein bought the film and began playing it at midnight across the United States. The midnight movie was born. Pink Flamingos was a 1972 black comedy independent film by John Waters with the tagline, "An exercise in poor taste." It was obscene, it was transgressive, it was appalling. Divine and her misfit family compete with a Baltimore couple to be named the filthiest people alive. The film culminates in a small dog defecating on the sidewalk, and Divine scoops up the feces and puts it in her mouth. Right after El Topo finished its midnight run at the Elgin, Ben Barinholtz picked up Pink Flamingos at the Elgin Theater, where it ran as a midnight movie for over a year. The buzz about Pink Flamingos soon spread to the West Coast, where the film played at midnight for years at the New Art Theater and across the country. The theatrical trailer for Pink Flamingos didn't show scenes from the movie at all, but rather people's reactions who just saw the film. The most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. Not to be believed. It was really the grossest film I've seen. I enjoy dirty things as much as anyone else, but this isn't even dirty. It's just disgusting. Now that is how you pique people's curiosity to see a movie you can only see at midnight. A mystique began to surround midnight movies. They felt forbidden and rebellious. The Harder They Come was the very first feature film shot in Jamaica by a Jamaican director with an all-Jamaican cast, a crime drama from 1972 that introduced reggae music to American audiences. It was melodic, it was groundbreaking, it was gritty. Reggae musician Ivan arrives in Kingston, Jamaica and records his first song, The Harder They Come. But after a bitter dispute with a manipulative producer, Ivan finds himself resorting to petty crime in order to pay the bills. Later, he kills some abusive cops, which causes him to become a local hero, and his record tops the charts. Ivan's friends suggest that he flee to Cuba, but a woman tells the police of his plans. The police ambush and shoot Ivan on the beach. During the closing credits, a woman is dancing to Ivan's hit song. The Harder They Come broke the mold of midnight movies, in that it actually was a huge hit in Jamaica during its initial release, being the very first time Jamaicans could see themselves portrayed realistically on the big screen. Never before had they seen people in a film speaking Jamaican patois. In fact, American audiences were so challenged to understand the English and the Jamaican patois spoken in the film that despite the film essentially being an English language film, subtitles were provided for American audiences. Long before The Walking Dead, there was The Night of the Living Dead, the quintessential zombie flick, in which the word zombie was never actually used. It was influential, it was controversial, it was subversive. A black man named Ben and a group of white people take refuge in a house when zombies come searching for human flesh to eat. While Ben does his best to control the situation, the others panic, and any semblance of order within the group begins to dissipate. One by one, the white people fall victim to the zombies. Ben is the only survivor of the night, only to face a different kind of horror in the morning. According to director and writer George Romero, Night of the Living Dead was never supposed to address the issue of race. The role of Ben was not intended to be African American, but black actor Dwayne Jones just happened to give the best audition. So it was decided that the script was not going to be altered to reflect the race of the actor. However, 1960s and 1970s audiences could not help but notice that the hero of the film was a conscientious black man who became the leader of the group, and that the next morning, the resourceful black hero is the only character to survive the zombies, only to be shot by a redneck posse. Perhaps even more shocking than the film's ending is the fact that due to an error in titling the film, Night of the Living Dead has been in the public domain since it was released. Night of the Living Dead had a near continuous run as a midnight movie at the Waverly Theater in New York City from 1971 to 1973, and played as a midnight movie across the country throughout the 1970s. 1975's Rocky Horror Picture Show is a sexually liberated musical reimagining of the Frankenstein story that pays homage to B-rated sci-fi and horror films from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. It was nostalgic, it was unapologetic, it was liberating. High school sweethearts Brad and Janet get stuck with a flat tire in a storm. They seek refuge in a nearby castle to use their landline. Unbeknownst to them, aliens from another galaxy are holding a convention in the castle to witness the unveiling of transvestite scientist Dr. Frankenfurter's creation, Rocky, a muscle man created for his sexual pleasure. Brad and Janet get drawn in to the festivities and get seduced. Like most cult movies, Rocky Horror failed to find a mainstream audience during its initial release. But once it was scheduled as a midnight movie, audiences not only found and embraced the film, they started to turn the film into an audience participation community event. Repeat viewers started coming dressed as their favorite characters. People saw the movie so many times that they started to yell out jokes in anticipation of the characters' dialogue. During the wedding scene, people in the audience would throw rice into the air in the movie theater. During the rainy scene over at the Frankenstein place, people would use water pistols to squirt other audience members, mimicking rain. Audience members stood up and danced the time warp in the aisles of the theater. Some of the most devoted bands formed shadow casts, acting out the movie in front of the screen, blurring the line between live theater and cinema. Rocky Horror was an event that spread across the country at midnight showings and continues to have regular midnight screenings still to this day. Rocky Horror Picture Show remains the longest running theatrical release in history. Before David Lynch created Twin Peaks or Mulholland Drive, he created the 1977 film Eraserhead. It was unconventional, it was disturbing, it was surreal. Henry Spencer, a man living in a bleak industrial world, is confronted with the challenges of parenthood when his girlfriend gives birth to a mutant baby and leaves Henry the newborn to raise. Eraserhead is a film with bizarre and disturbing imagery. Ben Barinholtz, then head of distributor Libra Films, persuaded local theater Cinema Village to run the film as a midnight feature, where it continued for a year. After this, it ran for 99 weeks at New York's Waverly Cinema, had a year-long midnight run at San Francisco's Roxy Theater from 1978 to 1979, and played at Los Angeles' New Art Theater between 1978 and 1981. So far, these films have been recent films of the era that found a niche but loyal audience at midnight. But there were also two films from the 1930s that found new audiences as midnight revivals in the 1970s. 1936's Reefer Madness was originally shown under the title Tell Your Children, a film financed by a church group intended to be shown to parents as a morality tale, attempting to teach them about the dangers of cannabis use. It was cautionary, it was hyperbolic, it was campy. The film revolves around the melodramatic events that ensue when high school students are lured by pushers to try marijuana. They become addicted, eventually leading them to become involved in crimes such as a hit-and-run accident, manslaughter, murder, conspiracy to murder, and attempted rape. While all this is happening, they suffer hallucinations, descend into insanity, associate with organized crime, basically every bad thing you can think of. Early on, producer Dwayne Esper purchased and recut the film for distribution on the exploitation film circuit beginning beginning in 1938 through the 1950s. The film escaped censorship under the guise of moral guidance. Reefer Madness was rediscovered in the 1970s as an unintentional satire on the midnight movie circuit. The movie is now in the public domain in the United States. After the success of directing Bela Lugosi in 1931's Dracula, director Todd Brown had the clout to get his 1932 film Freaks greenlit. It was vindictive. It was upsetting. It was ghastly. When trapeze artist Cleopatra learns that Hans, a circus performer who lives with dwarfism, has an inheritance, she deceptively marries him, planning all along to murder him in order to steal his fortune and run off with her lover, strongman Hercules. When Hans's friends and fellow sideshow performers discover what is going on, they band together and carry out a brutal revenge that leaves Hercules and Cleopatra knowing what it truly means to be a freak. In its initial release, Freaks was a box office bomb. The film was banned in the United Kingdom for over 30 years. Freaks mostly faded into obscurity until the 1962 Cannes Film Festival, when the 1960s counterculture took notice of the film. Freaks gained momentum as a revival film, especially in Europe. In the 1970s, Freaks made its way back to the States, where it was rediscovered by American audiences as a midnight movie in the 1970s and 80s. While these films were the most prominent midnight movies, there were others, including 1981's Heavy Metal, 1977's Kentucky Fried Movie, concert films such as 1976's The Song Remains the Same, and 1981's Dance Craze, with two-tone British ska bands that brought in the second wave of ska music. I saw Dance Craze at a midnight showing back in the day, and audience members went to the front of the theater and danced in the aisles to the lively ska beat. Well, in the 1980s, video may not have actually killed the radio star, but it did kill the midnight movie. The increasing popularity and availability of home videos and cable television in the late 1970s and early 1980s gave cult film audiences a way to access these films at home without staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning. In the 2000s, it was common for movies such as Harry Potter and The Lord of the Rings to premiere at midnight. Since movies are generally released on Fridays, to develop hype over a movie, often the movie was first screened at a midnight showing late Thursday night, technically Friday morning. While it's true that these films premiered at midnight, they were mainstream films that just happened to play at midnight and not part of the midnight movie circuit. While Rocky Horror Picture Show soldiered on as a midnight movie, for the most part, midnight movies had become a thing of the past. However, there was a small resurgence in the 2000s with Donnie Darko and The Room. Donnie Darko is a 2001 American science fiction psychological thriller. It was jarring. It was dreamlike. It was menacing. During the presidential election of 1988, a teenager named Donnie Darko sleepwalks out of his house one night and sees a giant, demonic-looking rabbit named Frank, who tells him that the world will end in 28 days. When Donnie returns home, he finds that a jet engine has crashed into his bedroom. Is Donnie living in a parallel universe? Is he suffering from mental illness? Or will the world really end? Donnie Darko was released just 6 weeks after the September 11th attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City. Advertising for the film was minimal, since the film includes a plane crashing into his bedroom, an unintentional reminder of the planes crashing into the Twin Towers. The timing could not have been worse. The film flopped at the box office during its initial release, but later developed a cult following. The co-owner of the Pioneer Theater in Manhattan's East Village had ongoing discussions with his 15-year-old son about what could be the next generation of midnight movies. The theater had played some of the midnight classics such as Pink Flamingos and Eraserhead. His son suggested Donnie Darko. As a result, in the 2000s, Donnie Darko had a successful 28-month run of midnight showings at his venue, the Pioneer Theater. The Room is a 2003 poorly written and poorly acted romantic drama set in San Francisco, centered on a melodramatic love triangle between a banker, his deceptive fiancée, and his conflicted best friend. The Room has been called the Citizen Kane of bad movies. It was strange. It was awkward. It was amateurish. Set in San Francisco, Johnny lives with his fiancée, Lisa, who secretly has an affair with Johnny's best friend, Mark. They get caught, leading Johnny into a nervous breakup. resulting in his ending his own life. Lisa tells Mark they are finally agreed to be together, but Mark rejects her, angry at her manipulative behavior towards Johnny. After The Room ended its initial run, people began emailing Tommy Wiseau, who wrote, directed, produced, and starred in the film. Encouraged by the response, Tommy booked a single midnight screening of the film in June 2004 in the Los Angeles area. With a solid turnout, he booked another midnight screening in July and then another in August. Soon thereafter, The Room began playing at midnight the last Saturday of every month until 2012. Dedicated fans of The Room call themselves Roomies and have developed Rocky Horror-style audience participation rituals all of their own.
You're tearing me apart, Lisa!
Roomies come dressed as their favorite characters, shout "focus" during blurry scenes, and throw plastic spoons whenever the spoon photograph in Johnny's apartment appears. The Room, Donnie Darko, and occasionally the Big Lebowski all proved that while midnight movies were no longer the craze of the 1970s, the phenomenon was not extinct either. Rocky Horror is the only midnight movie from the heyday of the 1970s that has played at midnight ever since. While midnight movies are mostly a thing of the past, Rocky Horror lives on with each new generation of moviegoers. Midnight movies are no longer on the periphery. They have become mainstream. Here's evidence. 2021 South Korean drama Squid Game has all the makings of a midnight movie. It is foreign, it's brutal, it's dystopic. While Squid Game has all the elements needed for a midnight movie, Squid Game was mainstream. At its peak, Squid Game was the most successful series on Netflix. Films that would have been a midnight movie are now mainstream. Nowadays, weird and shocking content is available 24/7. It no longer requires an appearance at midnight in a dark movie theater. Now I want to hear from you. What midnight movie have you seen? What midnight movie memories do you have? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, you will love these great videos about cinematic history. Click on one now.